Welcome back to This Day in Scottish History. I'm your host, Colin MacDonald. Today we reflect on November 11th, 1918, a date forever etched in history as the end of the First World War. On this day, after 4 years of relentless and brutal conflict, an armistice came into effect, bringing a halt to the fighting that had devastated nations and reshaped societies. In Scotland, this day marked a bittersweet end to what had become known as the Great War, a conflict that left an indelible mark on the nation's history and people. For Scotland, the First World War was one of the most destructive conflicts it had ever faced. Known for its fierce warriors and proud tradition, Scotland saw many of its brightest and strongest youth leave home, never to return. It's estimated that around 147,609 Scots lost their lives in this conflict, an extraordinary number for a country that made up only a tenth of the UK's population. Scottish soldiers made up a fifth of Britain's total war dead, a staggering statistic that meant Scots died at twice the rate of their counterparts south of the border. When Britain declared war on Germany in 1914, Scottish recruiting offices overflowed with eager volunteers, their spirits lifted by a sense of patriotic duty and camaraderie. Caught up in the fervour of defending Europe against what was seen as a German menace, young Scots men and women felt the call to serve. Within the first year of the conflict, a quarter of Scotland's coal miners had enlisted, and recruitment offices in Glasgow saw a rush like no other city in Britain. In some battalions, 1,000 men would sign up within a single day. As the young men of Scotland joined the fight, they faced early training that was, at first, almost light-hearted. A dad's army sort of initiation where broom handles sometimes replaced rifles in drills. But when they reached the front lines in France, they entered a world of horrors they could scarcely have imagined. Trench warfare meant enduring filthy conditions, the omnipresent threat of disease, and worst of all, wave after wave of near suicidal attacks. One of the earliest and most notorious battles to involve Scottish soldiers was the Battle of Loos in October 1915, the first major British offensive of the war. Scottish regiments were ordered over the top and into open ground, advancing toward German lines in what would become a tragic slaughter. The British had attempted to use poison gas, but the wind betrayed them, blowing the deadly fumes back toward their own lines. Despite the catastrophic start, Scottish soldiers pressed on under relentless enemy fire, becoming easy targets for German machine gunners. By the end of the battle, 50,000 British lives had been lost, with Scotland bearing a heavy portion of the toll. And yet the horror continued. The Battle of the Somme in June 1916 was another grim chapter, with Scottish regiments among those taking the full brunt of a campaign that would become infamous for its staggering loss of life. Led by Edinburgh-born General Douglas Haig, the battle was intended to bring a decisive victory, but Haig's belief in a powerful attack proved tragically misplaced. Highland Light Infantry soldiers, along with other Scottish regiments, were again ordered into the firestorm, advancing across no man's land to the sound of bagpipes. On that first day alone, over 20,000 Allied soldiers lost their lives, and by the battle's end, the Scots had endured some of the heaviest losses of the entire war. While Scottish soldiers fought bravely at the front, the people of Scotland were hard at work, supporting them from home. The Clyde Valley became a hub of munitions production, with nearly 250,000 Scots engaged in manufacturing supplies for the troops by 1917. Scottish shipyards worked tirelessly to turn out vessels for the war effort, while women took on new roles in factories, producing essential supplies from blankets to the war's newest invention, tanks. This was a transformative time for Scottish women who had been at the forefront of the suffragette movement before the war. Their work during the conflict demonstrated their abilities and raised their standing in society, helping to secure them the right to vote in the years that followed. Despite the unity of purpose on the home front, Scotland was not immune to social tensions. Rising costs of living and stagnant wages led to widespread discontent among workers, particularly in the shipyards and munitions factories. Skilled labourers, in particular, began to resent the sacrifices demanded by the war effort. Strikes and rent protests erupted, with workers demanding fairer treatment, and this unrest foreshadowed the emergence of Red Clydeside, a period of significant socialist and labour activism that would shape Scotland's social and political landscape for decades to come. In the end, the Great War was supposed to be the war to end all wars. For Scotland, it very nearly put an end to an entire generation. The armistice on November 11th, 1918, marked the beginning of peace, but it also left Scotland to mourn and rebuild. The war's staggering losses left many communities with few men of working age and families with empty seats at their tables. In the years that followed, Scotland grappled with its grief and set about honouring its fallen, those 147,609 Scots whose lives had been cut short in service to a cause they believed in. Today, we remember them. On this day in Scottish history, we pause to reflect on the sacrifices made and the resilience shown in the face of almost unimaginable hardship. As we observe Remembrance Day, let us honour those brave souls who gave everything for the freedom and peace we cherish. Thank you for joining us today on This Day in Scottish History. I'm Colin MacDonald. Until next time, haste ye back.